So this is Kevin from BrotoGP here with former Superbike champion Josh Hayes.
Hi.
So last year we did an interview that wasn't even really supposed to be an interview. I just was talking to you next to the Yamaha tent about being retired, and it kind of turned into a little bit of a treatise on being retired, or maybe, as it's clearly become, not so retired.
Well, I think I had said it back then. I didn't want to stop riding. It just the way things worked out. And, it's like you couldn't really hold any hard feelings because if I were in the position of management, I don't know that I would have seen it any differently. But it still hurts inside to not be riding. So here we go. I find myself really 2 years later, and I'm doing some riding. I'm having a blast with it. But it is definitely a lot different than what I did before. But, you know, so far so good. We had a couple of rough weekends, and then so far this weekend has gone fairly well, and we'll have to see how it finishes up. And it's really been a weekend by weekend thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more. But the last couple weekends have been tough. The first one was good. We rode at Virginia, got on the podium twice, which was excellent. So this is pretty easy. All right, we're back in this. And then Elkhart Lake, some problems reared their ugly head, and you find yourself behind pretty far, and you think, okay, but I'm still putting up purple sectors, so I'm still riding pretty good. I feel pretty good about it. Go to Miller and throw myself on the ground immediately and put myself on the back foot pretty quickly and just struggle through the weekend, and then you go home for 4 weeks of just doubts. And not only that, but also knowing that as a professional, I'm not the same guy I was before, but you remember yourself at your best stuff, and that now I'm more a dad than a professional racer, and my wife and I are hustling for money, so I don't have the selfish life of being able to come home and all I could think about was fixing the problems of the previous race. I went home and hung out with my kid and didn't think about racing for a long time. And so you go to the next one and you go, why am I not getting better? And you look back and you go, oh, okay, well, that's why. So we come here and we have a good start, and it kind of gets the juices flowing again and feeling good about things again.
Do you find that disconnect with the wife, the kid, and the more domestic aspects of it is kind of freeing in a way? I mean, you worked your way up. You completely to the factory ride, top of the mountain, win the championship. Like, you do all of the things that people only dream about. That 90% of the people in this paddock, like, that's their whole fucking dream, right? And then you take some time off and you return. Do you find that the returning to the paddock, but in the privateer sort of aspect, like, mentally freeing? Like, I'm here to ride because I want to be on a bike and I want to keep the competitive juices flowing, but it's not with the intent of, or maybe it is, but I don't think it's with the intent of returning to, like, the factory status. Like,
no, I'm not here to resurrect my career.
right.
I'm definitely just here to have a good time. I love being in this paddock. It's like a home away from home. It's my second family on the road and has been for 25 years. So I can't imagine not being here. I was actually, we were contemplating a few different things, and parts of this have been quite difficult. And you think, man, I just want a break. But then you think, man, since 1999, I've not gone to one national in that time, and it was like Pikes Peak 2002. So just the thought of there being a race and me not being there and involved in some way is really a foreign thought, a really hard thing to swallow. So I love being here, but I think one thing that is happening is the coaching, mentoring, whatever aspect you want to call that, it's becoming more rewarding over time. And the riding, I'm trying to be real about it. I'm fortunate that one thing about my career is not being the most talented guy. I had to learn my craft well. And one thing that I'm able to bring to the table with riding is, one, I stay current. Two, I go, all right, guys, I sat on the couch for 2 years. I come back and I'm relatively competitive because I learned my craft well. I'm steady and I can do this at a manageable risk, and I can't do it at the level of the top guys without going home and acting like a professional too. But I learned it pretty well, and I'm pretty solid all around and fundamentally correct. So it allows me to have some credibility in that aspect, where probably with some coaches it gets harder and harder over time as technology is changing and they're not experiencing that technology, that it's hard for them to bring something new to the game and stay relevant and current just watching from the sideline. I'm still out there kind of getting in the middle of it.
Right. So as a coach, you're able to sort of put to practice the concepts that you're espousing, right? You're saying,
Well, I'm teaching by example. Even, I'm still saying, look, I'm able to go out there and do this and be pretty solid with it. This is what I worked on for years, and it's a successful it's a recipe for success, and I can show it to you even now with what I'm doing. So
right. Experiential teaching obviously is much better than like I've made this joke in other sports. If I show you how to do it, shoot a jumper, as long as I've done it before you real quick, but to be out, you're just repeating, right? But someone teaching you to play jazz or to flow within a band aspect, they can only do that by having done it and continuing to do it. Right, exactly. Do you find that you are taking the lessons you've learned and adding new things because of this, because you're racing this year, or are you just continuing to kind of put into practice those principles that you've been coaching the guys for a while? I.e., like by racing, you're improving your teaching by learning a new craft.
no, I think the teaching just backs up the concepts that I feel like I'm trying to impart on the guys. But the coaching job has actually changed somewhat from what I expected it to be. And a lot of what I see other guys doing, I think I'm doing something a little bit different. I find that I'm spending as much or probably more time. I'm really like Garrett Gerloff, Bobby Fong, Richie Escalante. They're fantastic riders. You know what I mean? Cam Peterson. Cam Peterson, we talk a little bit about riding, but the aspect that I unexpectedly bring to all of these guys is that I'm teaching them how to communicate with their teams. I'm teaching them a little bit of what their job is versus what a motorcycle is supposed to do. And I can stand back and go, you're talking about this bike, but dude, it doesn't matter anymore. It's race time. We can't change it. This is what you got. You need to put the whiny thing off to the side, and now it's on you to show the world what you can do regardless of what you've got. And to remind them, because teams forget to do this sometimes, is the only way to get to where you want to be is you have to beat that guy with less. The factory teams hire the fastest riders, and if you don't show that you have something that you can take to that guy, they're just going to keep that guy regardless of what he's riding. They know he's got the best bike. They want the best rider on the best bike. And so you have to take less and do more with it. And everybody, it's easy to sit back and go, well, he's got this and he's got that. It's another thing that management looks at when you have the attitude of, I'll take what I got. I know it's capable of winning. I'm going to go figure out how to do that.
So speaking of getting to where you want to be and doing more with less, obviously that's sort of where you're at right now, right? You're no longer the factory rider. You're doing your own team. You're kind of running it. Where is it that you want to take this like second chapter, so to speak? Where do you want to be with this? All things considered.
This program was never about me riding in the first place, quite honestly. Melissa was approached after running MP13 Racing for a couple of years in Junior Cup fairly successfully. I mean, last year she had the only Yamaha win in the Dry and Junior Cup with Corey Ventura, and she put together a pretty solid program. So she was approached by someone to bring in somebody who was wanting to come into the country and get into super sport racing, and the deal started kind of getting some momentum, and everything was sounding really good. And we had gotten to the point where we were committed to buying a motorcycle to make this team happen. And everything sounded great, handshake deal. And then the contract got sent, and then we never heard from them again. The money doesn't get funded, and it just goes away. And Mel had some options of working for other teams in the paddock as a mechanic or this and that, but she didn't want to give up on her idea of MP13 racing. So we kind of went, you know what, like, there's a few fun things that can happen. That Daytona 200 is this elusive thing that's gotten away from us a couple of times. She goes, why don't we just build a bike and let's go try Daytona? And we decided to do this 6 weeks before the event. So we recruited in some help from people that we knew, pieced the bike together, got everything we needed, assembled a decent crew, and we showed up and we were competitive in the Daytona 200. The idea was if we can win it, that's fantastic, but if we're competitive, we can show that Melissa, I still got to have a good motorcycle underneath me to do something good. We can showcase that Melissa can crew chief the Daytona 200, one of the hardest races to do in the country, and put out a strong effort. So if someone else wants to come get on this super sport bike and take part in it, that's great. So we go there and we had a pretty good run. Got fourth, and man, so last minute. We didn't practice pit stops until the night before the race in the campground under a street lamp. And we ended up having some of the best pit stops in the race. The bike performed well, suspension wise, everything was good, and we were pretty happy with our performance. Nothing happened in Atlanta, so then it kind of comes around to Virginia, and we said, well, you know what? Here's another cool idea. I'm 4 races away from the all-time win record, and if I could get that, that would be pretty cool. And we had some people at Yamaha fighting for us and said, hey, this is what it takes to run the bike each weekend. If we can raise that money, then we can afford to go race it. If we don't raise the money, we can leave it in the truck, and I got my coaching job, and that's just fine. Because one thing I can't do is charge the 600 guys for coaching when I'm racing against them. So I'm still trying to do the job for them, but I can't do it when I'm out there riding against them. And I just don't think it's the right thing to do. So the superbike guys I still work with pretty hard, and spend my time there. But it basically cost me money to go racing this motorcycle, even when we raise a decent amount of funds to get out there. But we've managed to do it, and we're just having some fun, and it's pretty cool. Melissa believes in me so much, having been by my side for so long, and I am wholeheartedly trusting in her, and I think she's done an amazing job of giving me a motorcycle that's capable of being up there. And it's hard sometimes because I'm not that guy that I was before. I'm not too far off, and I'm getting better all the time. But like, I have other jobs on these race weekends. I don't come in and debrief with her for half an hour and try to figure out where we're going next with the bike. I end up running over and debriefing with the guys that I'm coaching and working with, and then you come here to like Laguna Seca, where I've got 10 media jobs with Yamaha that they're still keeping me involved with their program. So fortunately, we showed up with suspension-wise the same bike we've been riding, and it's been working really well, and we've showcased pretty strong here versus the last couple weekends that we had.
So one of the things we talked about last interview, because I've kind of viewed this as a sequel, almost like this kind of interview, because it was real fun, but we talked about the feeder system, or the lack thereof, last time. I don't remember specifically, but some things have changed, right? The economy in the United States is continuing to grow by a lot of metrics. MotoAmerica has changed its streaming service, and from all accounts, viewership is up significantly. At least from what I've heard on the rumors and inside and whatnot. Not that I'm right, exactly. But we see a steady rise, right? The rising tide, so to speak, raises all boats. Where do you see that farm system a year on comparatively? Is it the same? Do we see improvements? Or are you seeing? I mean, you said she's looking maybe to bring people from overseas, but at the same time, are we looking around here, or do you still think it's lacking in a way that it's not giving the sport maybe the foundation it could have?
No, I still think it's hurting on the base of the pyramid is still struggling. Man, it's kind of hard to say. The track day is up so much, but the beginning racer and the guys that get hooked into that, I got through the novice and got into the expert ranks and want to kind of chip away at it. That little bit in the middle there is what's really missing, and that's where I think, in my opinion, the local club racing is kind of missing out. I think that personally, I think the business model is broken. I feel like they're pointing the fingers at track days, saying that it's killing racing, and you go, well, bang for the buck. Yeah, if I have my choice, if this is a hobby, I'm okay with spending $200 to ride till my arms fall off and have to do no prep to my motorcycle, versus I'm going to go sign up at a club race weekend where they're running 19 races on a day, and a 6-lap race turns into a 4-lap race. I spend $350 in entry fees to ride 2 or 3, what ends up being a 4-lap race at the end of the day. So it's a lot of hurry up and wait and sit around all day so I can showcase what I can do against 10 guys for 6 laps or 4 laps. That bang for buck just isn't quite there. So it seems that they're trying to make a class for every motorcycle ever made, rather than narrowing it down, saying these are the bikes that are current, that are out there. Let's bring these things and make this kind of the showcase that this is what you need to be doing, but keep the rules so standard that it's really easy to get involved. What we don't see is we see motorhomes at club races, not pickup trucks. And whenever I started racing, it was all pickup trucks, and we made fun of the people with the motorhomes because they were rich. And that's just not what club racing looks like anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly nobody when it comes to club racing, but I spent a couple of years racing AFM, and it was out of the back of a crappy van that ended up throwing a rod through this out of the engine case on the way to Thunderhill. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had talked actually about there's a track day guy that was maybe interested in sponsoring YouTube videos, stuff like that. But one of the things I talked about was the transition, not only just how to get into track days, but transitioning from track days to racing, because racing's never been more accessible. You know what I mean? The ability to race is it's an accessible sport for the hobbyist, the amateur, and the like. And like you said, they make
California kind of has its own little climate about it. And then the East Coast is pretty strong, and kind of the middle of the country is missing a little bit. But like even when Melissa and I started dating and got engaged, and I moved her to the East Coast, the club racing was pretty strong there. And right now, I feel like from what I can see, AFM and like CVMA seem to be kind of the stronger ones. I don't know if it's just because I'm closer to them being in California now, but they seem to be running pretty strong, where I hear that things like Ware and CCS are struggling, and I think it's just maybe the business model.
Yeah, and back then, sort of pre-recession, which I think in a lot of sports that are based on branding and sponsorship, there can be sort of a view of pre and post-recession realities. One of the talks is that like the next great American GP or AMA world Superbike champion was riding motocross somewhere, because it was your PW80 costs nothing. He's 6 years old. His dad puts it in the back of the pickup truck, and at the time, Supermoto was kind of viewed as maybe this potential bridge between that. And I told that joking story about you and Supermoto at the Queen Mary looking at me super weird, but you must have been looking at someone in the back. But I remember Supermoto was the hot thing, and I knew a lot of dirt bike kids who were moving over, and there was some talk that was, I mean, Ben Spies was a motocross guy that moved over at some point, slightly differently, but not through Supermoto, but he, that was kind of the story of when he was younger. Do you see any way to bring over kids from the motocross and the supercross style to road racing, or is that just not something that's going to happen anymore?
I think that mini racing is stronger than it's ever been in America, quite honestly. I mean, more kart tracks are open to letting motorcycles and mini bikes and supermotos be a part of it. So when I was started, that really wasn't in existence. People weren't doing those types of things. So that, at the young age, is more accessible than ever. Just motocross is just so competitive. There's so many of these young guys out there, and you can find motocross tracks are more accessible than asphalt tracks. End of discussion. So the hard part is still just our economy and how spread out everything is, and so getting people introduced to it is harder. That's basically what it comes down to. And in how things have gone with the economy, when people stepped away from motorcycles, it's hard to get them back. And the biggest arguments, I feel like I got into an argument on the internet, and I'm embarrassed to say that but it's one of those things where somebody said, wanted to scream about like purses at pro racing and why pro racing is bad. And I go, no, like at the end of the day, the only people that benefit from this are the manufacturers. They spend the marketing dollars because they need to sell motorcycles. If they don't sell motorcycles, there's no ROI. They don't spend money, and then nobody spends money because it relies on them. They have the most to gain from it. So when I said, look, you want to help racing in America, come to a race, bring a friend, introduce somebody new to it, go buy a motorcycle. Those are the things that you can do if you want to see the manufacturers put money back into racing. Contingency to help that middle of the road guy, the expert guy trying to work his way up, can go chase that money to keep himself going rather than working in his job, and that being the only way he can keep himself going. So I'm going to starve my kid so I can go try some club racing for fun. So the more involvement we can get in motorcycles and motorsports and get away from the screens maybe a little bit, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the screen thing, as I've been talking, on my phone now I have the screen time right, because it seems like it's
it gives you a little...
It gives you, oh my God, I've been on the phone way more. Right, exactly. I lost my train of thought a little bit, but I was lost where I was going with that. That's all right.
We were talking about screen time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, like the disconnect from motorcycles and you like contingency. Not really, because I mean, you like we talk
I knew
about.
guys who made a living chasing that. You know what I mean? I knew guys that made, $50 to $100,000 in a year chasing Yamaha factory contingency at one time, where they would take an R6 and an R1 and go to a club race, and they could make $1,000 in each class, make $4,000 a weekend. So they buy a brand new bike, pay it off by April,
Right.
racing club races, and then make nothing but profit from that point forward. And there were guys that took it to a really high level doing that, and then moved into pro racing and were fairly successful doing that. I mean, that's what I had to do. I got lucky where at the time I started, amateur racing was big enough that there were teams. John Ulrich's team was in the endurance series in FUSA, not at the pro level, which was AMA Pro. So at that time, I got into his support system. He basically said, "Here, I'm going to give you 2 motorcycles that I went back at the end of the year, but I want you to keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to help you do it, and you're going to do it under our team banner." And I got leathers and this and that, and I just went and chased money to keep myself going and gained experience along the way. I'm really disappointed that there is not. I'm glad that I think it's Into and Where have kind of gotten together for a couple of endurance races, but I'm kind of disappointed there's not more endurance racing out there, because that was some of the most fun that I had and the cheapest way to go racing I could think of.
Well, and it seems like that kind of endurance racing addresses a couple of the points that were up earlier, which is a return on investment on track time, bang for your buck. You go endurance racing, you're going to get a couple hours worth of riding. Right. And also it comes into when you were talking about how you honed your craft and your technique was that you were heavily reliant on concepts, working hard, riding your ass off, because it wasn't like you were saying the most naturally talented guy ever, but you were the hardest working, the smartest, and the most reflective. And endurance racing gives you all of those things.
It does so many things. I've had to ride, you have to compromise in every way, because everybody's got to get the feeling that they're looking for to be competitive on the bike. But you learn things along the way. Growing up, now we see people specialized in so many areas. The one thing that I saw, last year that I really liked was Aaron Yates having his kid riding, Ashton riding both 600 Super Sport and Junior Cup. Because coming up, when I was club racing, I rode as many bikes and classes as I could. And at one point I was riding 3 different motorcycles, a 600, 750, and 1100 every weekend in as many classes as I could sign up for. And I learned something from each of those that I could apply somewhere or at the right time, learn tracks. I opened everything up, right? It just opened the keys to the door. You couldn't get everything perfect, but you could learn things and learn how to ride around problems. In endurance racing, somebody tips over, you get a bent bike, and you got to go out there and you got to figure out how to finish the race and still be competitive. And all those things just paid huge dividends, where now so many people are complaining about some pretty small things sometimes, and it's like one of the things I work with one of my guys is just, you got to be stoic, man. I had to pull up the definition of stoic and text it to him as a screenshot and go, "Dude, every time you start wigging out about something stupid, I want you to look at this and think about this, and this is what you need to project, because people already know you're nervous, and if you show it, they're going to take advantage of it, and this is who you need to be." And
yeah, endurance racing too, it gives you it's almost like that, like you said, he crashed, he bent the bars, I got to finish it. And that becomes a point of pride. I worked through that. Or, people do take pride in overcoming and learning and honing your craft through a series that basically requires you to overcome consistently and work around stuff.
On top of that, think about, in a 4 to 6 lap race, how much racecraft are you learning, right? So whenever you get an endurance race and you get the entire grid spread out over the racetrack, what we used for motivation was trying to time when I was going to catch somebody, plan my pass ahead of time as you're working your way through traffic, hopefully if you're fast enough to do that. But there was always something going on out on the racetrack that kept me busy, kept me focused, and I had to learn to read people, to figure out a little bit of body language of how they're moving, watch trajectories to see how to counter those things and make good things happen, and just be smart about how you approached and attacked that stuff. Learned a lot about racing,
Just racing in general and all aspects. earlier we interviewed Eugene Laverty, and he talked about one of the reasons he came back for this round, among that it allowed him a couple different testing protocols, was that
Sorry, you need something.
we're grabbing something here.
Sorry.
No, it's all good, man. Editing is so easy these days. Yeah, exactly. So he had mentioned that one of the reasons he returned with a pretty gnarly wrist injury was almost like a mental health. He just didn't want to go 4 months not being on a bike, right? And he was like, it's not really the smartest thing I've ever done, but I wanted to be here because I just don't want to be off of the bike. For someone that left for a time and has come back and has been having fun, how long do you see this going? You know, the kind of the program and the system that you're doing right now, balancing coaching and riding, and you know, Melissa, you know, her crew chief and doing her thing. How far do you see this particular program going?
Well, like I said, the idea of this was to get Melissa going on the MP13 thing. It wasn't so much about me. We have a cool story, and if we can make it work, that's fine. But honestly, we're on a weekend by weekend basis, and I'm not, you know, if I don't get to ride at Sonoma because we can't raise the funds to do it, I'm not going to be devastated as I would have been at one point in my career. But I am enjoying what I'm doing, and if I get the opportunity to go out there and be competitive and race, man, I miss it. People are so nice to me because I ride a motorcycle good. You know what I mean? Like I'm humbled by how many people say, "Man, we love seeing you back out there. We love seeing you race. The TV guys talk about you." And I mean, how can you not like that people are so nice to you for something that's so selfish in this world? I didn't do anything. I haven't really given anything back. I didn't cure cancer. I didn't do anything. I rode a motorcycle, and people are nice to me for it. So I'm very thankful for it. And it's amazing that I've done something well in this world, because how many people reached out to actually be a part of this and help the story of me and my wife going racing. You know, that we're having a great time, and I do want to keep doing it just because it's fun. But, you know, the grand idea is that this grows MP13 Racing, and that, you know, the one good thing that comes from it is my coaching probably is going to be a part of it. You know, and you know, the writing's on the wall, and I'm already currently, like I said, not the same guy I was. I want to be, and I've had people ask me, like, what would it take, and you know, they want to say that it's expensive or selfish or whatever the money it requires. But I mean, I got to be honest, the cost of it is what someone would expect from me that would pay me to ride a motorcycle. The guy that they want, that guy was the most selfish human being on the planet. And what he did was I obsessed over racing when I wasn't at the racetrack. And that time away from my family and this and that, it comes at a price. And not to say that, but also, I mean, my wife's a pretty busybody too. So I can't crush everything she's working for. It's just not going to work that way in my family. So I have to be able to afford childcare, right, so that I can go out and do
no easy task either
to do. Yeah. And it can't be just regular childcare, right? You got to have it here at the racetrack too. And you know, all those things have been really hard, because I went from making pretty good money to really no income. And so it's been not a struggle, but a definite adjustment. Right. And you know, there's also insurance that you want to make sure if something did happen, you take care of your kids. It's not getting easier to fall down. Fortunately, my bones still seem pretty strong. I took a pretty good thump at Miller, and I got out of it all right, you know. But, you know, I love that I can still get out there. And any opportunity that comes my way to do something fun, I think I would still probably be the reserve rider if something happened at the factory team. That they would probably give me a call and say, hey, we think you're a pretty safe bet. And the fact that I'm still riding and staying current on the 600 would probably help make that happen, you know. So I'm easy for a team to put on a bike if they're worried about the bike and some guy trying to impress them, right, you know. And so, but honestly, like I said, it's a week by week kind of thing. I'm having a good time. My riding is not too bad. There are some things about my riding that I think are more solid than I was in 2017. But here's what happens, like being away from it for a year and a half, how quickly things come at you. The focus is the thing that loses out. Right. And being able to maintain that focus over race distance, how hyper focused I was at doing my job. those are the things that slip away, and it's really hard to train that back. It takes a lot of work, and I think it's more training than it is learning, And I'm not too far off, but when you're talking about racing a guy like Cam Beaubier or Tony Elias, it's just not quite the same. You get there, all the stars line up right, maybe you're pretty close. You make a race of it today, but on a week by week basis, I'm not the guy that I was 3 years ago.
So you mentioned, you started the season with a couple of podiums, and then had some rough patches. What do you think it is, the thing that you do need to do to take that next step to maybe get back to that podium, podium pace and fighting for that stuff, maybe that all-time wins record that you're, chasing after?
Me personally, like, I think any given weekend could be a good weekend for me. This weekend's gone pretty well so far, but like if I wanted to be there for the championship on a steady basis, getting in there for race wins every weekend, there are some things that are okay in other areas that need a little bit of work. But the thing that worked really well for me was when I acted like a professional at home, I brought that to the racetrack. So whatever it was with my training, if I felt like I was putting in the work, and I looked around and I said, I worked harder than anybody else here, I acted accordingly at the racetrack. And it just requires a ridiculous amount of time to do that. And that's, I think, probably the key that's missing. The desire and the risk management, I don't feel like any of that's changed. Having Hawk come along hasn't taken away or made me think differently on the racetrack of like, oh, I want to manage the risk through this part of it. I'm still going for it. And I was laughing because yesterday after qualifying on the 600, I'm like, man, I've spun the tire more on the 600 than I did in the last 5 years of riding a superbike. Like, it's just a different kind of riding, and I'm so much enjoying the 600 because in some ways it's more pure than riding a superbike. The racing on a 600, it is at the absolute limit every inch of the racetrack, where the superbike was a little bit different. It was like all this effort going in, and then you relax in the middle and let the bike do its thing and get pointed in the right direction, and then take advantage of the power and draw straight lines and let it get it off the corner. And the 600 just doesn't have the luxury of that. You're on it. You're on it every inch of the track, and that is that grinding kind of riding. It actually suits me really well. It's something it's a riding that I enjoy to do. So I'm probably having more fun on this bike, but I always wanted to race the fast guys. They were on super bikes, so that's why I wanted to be there.
So this has been Talking with Josh Hayes. This is part 2, basically, of a little sequel of an interview we did last year at Sonoma. It was great. I'm really thankful for you taking time away from the kid and the wife to talk to us for a while. It was really rad, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And look me up. I'm around. I got lots of stories to tell.
The good stories. The after dark stories.
Yeah, like I'm getting to do some cool things. We'll have to talk about the classic bike racing. That's something that was new to me. So it's been pretty interesting going over to Phillip Island and riding over there. And what a cool atmosphere it was. It actually opened my eyes and made me be interested a little bit in classic racing, which I never thought I would be. So pretty cool deal.
We're going to be at Sonoma. I'll have to catch up with you on the classic bike racing aspect. Yeah, sweet, man. Thanks again. Perfect.